The last person who spoke her name lost 3 fingers. That was the story, anyway. It moved through the palace like smoke, whispered in stairwells and pantries and behind closed doors where people thought the walls were not listening. A young lord at a banquet, 4 months after the decree, had raised his cup and slurred the forbidden name like it was a toast. The king had not shouted, had not risen from his chair. He had simply looked at the young lord with eyes so empty they stopped every voice in the hall. The guards dragged the man out. No one saw him for 6 days. When he returned, his right hand was wrapped in bloodied linen and his mouth never opened at anyone's table again. Sable did not know if the story was true. She did not intend to find out. She kept her head down, her hands busy, and her mouth shut, which was exactly how a foundling who worked in the palace kitchen survived to see her 23rd year. She had no family name, no bloodline, no rank. She had been left on the castle steps as an infant, wrapped in a flour sack with no note, and raised by whoever had the patience to tolerate her that season. The kitchen had claimed her at 9. She had been there ever since, and in 14 years she had perfected the art of being invisible. It was a useful skill in a palace ruled by a king who could hear your heartbeat from across a courtyard and smell fear like other men smelled rain. King Thandrik Voss did not tolerate weakness. He did not tolerate sentiment. And above all else, he did not tolerate the name of the woman who had once been his mate. No one said it. Not the advisors, not the servants, not even the Queen Dowager, his own mother, who was dying slowly in a tower room that smelled of dried marigold and grief. Which was how Sable ended up standing outside that tower room on a cold autumn evening with a tray of bone broth she had not volunteered to carry. "The Queen's attendant is sick," Mistress Ondine had said, pressing the tray into Sable's hands with the efficiency of a woman who had no time for arguments. Ondine was the palace healer, a severe woman with silver-streaked hair and a gaze that could curdle milk. "You will bring this to her grace. Make sure she drinks it, and you will not speak unless spoken to. Is that understood?" "Yes, mistress." "And Sable." Ondine had caught her arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Whatever she says to you, whatever you hear in that room, you repeat to no one. The Queen Dowager's mind wanders. She says things she does not mean. Do you understand?" Sable had nodded, her stomach tightening at the warning. She understood. Everyone understood. Queen Dowager Elspeth was dying, and dying people sometimes said things that could get the living killed. The guard outside the tower room barely glanced at her before pushing the door open. Sable stepped inside, and the smell hit her immediately. Sickness. Not the sharp medicinal scent of the infirmary, but something deeper, sweeter, and far more final. The room was warm, almost suffocating, the fire built too high in the hearth. Curtains had been drawn against the autumn wind, trapping the heat and the shadows inside. And in the center of it all, propped against a mountain of pillows in a bed far too large for her wasted frame, lay Queen Dowager Elspeth Voss. She had been beautiful once. Sable could see it in the architecture of her face, the high cheekbones, the elegant line of her jaw. But the sickness had carved her down to bone and papery skin, leaving only the ghost of the woman she had been. Her eyes, though, her eyes were sharp, bright and fierce and entirely present, fixed on Sable with an intensity that made her want to step backward. "You are not Bretta," the Queen Dowager said. Her voice was thin but steady. "No, Your Grace. Bretta is unwell. I have brought your broth." "Come closer." Sable obeyed, crossing the room on quiet feet. She set the tray on the bedside table and began arranging the bowl, the spoon, the cloth napkin, keeping her hands busy so they would not shake. The Queen Dowager watched every movement. "What is your name, child?" "Sable, Your Grace." "Sable." The Queen Dowager tested the word like she was tasting it. "And where are your people, Sable?" I have no people, your grace. I was raised here in the palace. Something shifted in the old woman's expression, a softening, or perhaps a sharpening. It was hard to tell. A foundling, she murmured. Good. Foundlings have no allegiances. They owe nothing to anyone. Sable did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. She lifted the spoon and held it toward the Queen Dowager's lips. Elspeth drank slowly, her gaze never leaving Sable's face. 3 spoonfuls in, she pushed the spoon away with trembling fingers. My son is dying, she said. Sable's hand froze mid-air. Your Grace, I do not think I am the right person to. He is dying, and he does not know it. Or he does, and he does not care. Which is worse? The Queen Dowager's eyes burned with a fire that had no business being in a body so frail. The blood oath is eating him alive, his wolf is rotting inside him. I can smell it when he visits. The decay, the poison. My own son sits beside me, and I can smell death on him, and he will not listen. Sable's heart was hammering now. She should not be hearing this. Your Grace, please, you should rest. I have been resting for 5 months, Elspeth snapped, and for a moment the Queen, she had been blazed through the ruin of her body. Resting is all I do while my son destroys himself over a woman who did not deserve his devotion, let alone his death. Sable set the spoon down carefully. Elspeth's hand shot out and caught her wrist, her grip shockingly strong for a dying woman. He must forgive her, Elspeth whispered, her eyes wild and desperate. Not for her sake, for his. He must say her name and release the oath, or the blood magic will consume him. Do you understand? And then, Queen Dowager Elspeth Voss, mother of the most feared Alpha King in 3 generations, leaned close enough that Sable could feel the heat of her failing body and whispered the name that no one in the kingdom was allowed to speak. Isolde. The word hung in the air like a blade. The door opened. Sable's blood turned to ice. King Thandrik Voss stood in the doorway, and he was looking directly at her. His nostrils flared. The air in the room shifted, charged with something electric and suffocating, and Sable realized with dawning horror that he had sensed something, because his eyes, pale amber shot through with gold, locked onto her with the absolute focus of a predator identifying a threat. Out, he said. One word. Quiet. Devastating. Sable did not remember standing, did not remember crossing the room. She was in the corridor and the door was closing behind her, and her legs were failing, and she pressed herself against the stone wall and tried to breathe through the terror crushing her chest. Inside the room, she heard the king's voice, low and controlled and terrible. What did you tell her, mother? Sable did not sleep that night. She lay on her narrow cot in the servants' quarters, staring at the ceiling, and replayed every second of what had happened in the Queen Dowager's room. The forbidden name echoed in her skull like a bell that would not stop ringing. Isolde. The woman who had betrayed the king. The woman whose name had been erased from every document, every record, every conversation in the kingdom. The woman whose memory was so dangerous that speaking it aloud could cost you your fingers, or worse. And the Queen Dowager had whispered it directly into Sable's ear. Why me? She kept asking the darkness. Why would she tell a kitchen worker the most dangerous secret in the palace? Because foundlings have no allegiances. That is what Elspeth had said. Foundlings owe nothing to anyone. But Sable owed something to herself, and that something was continued breathing. She needed to forget what she had heard, forget the name, forget the blood oath, forget the Queen Dowager's desperate burning eyes, forget it all, and go back to being invisible. By morning, she had almost convinced herself she could. Then Marin found her. The king's beta was a tall woman with close-cropped dark hair and a face that gave away absolutely nothing. She appeared in the kitchen doorway while Sable was elbow-deep in bread dough, and the entire room went quiet. Betas did not visit the kitchens. Ever. Sable, Marin said. Not a question. Sable's hands stilled in the dough. Flour dusted her arms to the elbows. Every worker in the room stopped moving, their eyes darting between Sable and the beta with barely concealed alarm. Yes, my lady? Come with me. Sable wiped her hands on her apron, her heart climbing steadily toward her throat. She followed Marin through corridors she had walked 1,000 times, but today they felt longer, narrower, the walls pressing closer with every step. The beta did not speak, did not look back. They stopped outside a door Sable had never passed through. The council anteroom, a windowless chamber that smelled of old wood and cold stone. Marin gestured her inside and closed the door behind them. Sit. Sable sat. She could hear her own breathing, too fast, too shallow, filling the silence like a confession. Marin stood across from her, arms folded, studying Sable the way a hawk studies a field mouse deciding whether to run. What did the Queen Dowager say to you last night? Sable's mouth went dry. Her grace was confused. Her mind was wandering. Mistress Ondine warned me that she sometimes says things she does not mean. That is not what I asked. Silence. Sable gripped her hands together in her lap so hard her knuckles ached. She could feel the beta's patience measured and precise, like a blade being held just above skin. She spoke about the king, Sable said carefully, about his health. She is worried about him. And? The word hung there, sharp and patient. And she said a name, Sable whispered. A name I am not supposed to know. Marin's jaw tightened. Did anyone else hear? No, just me. And then the king arrived. Something flickered behind the beta's eyes, too fast to read. What did he hear? I do not know. He told me to leave. I left. Marin leaned against the wall, and for the first time Sable saw something other than controlled authority in the woman's posture. Fatigue, maybe. Or the particular exhaustion of someone who had been carrying too many secrets for too long. The Queen Dowager has been asking for you, Marin said. Sable blinked. What? She asked this morning, by name. She wants you to attend her instead of Bretta. But I am not trained to care for... She does not want a trained attendant, Marin interrupted. She wants you. She paused. You will attend the Queen Dowager in the evenings. You will bring her meals, keep her company, and report anything unusual to me directly. She moved toward the door, then stopped. And Sable, whatever she tells you stays between you, me, and those walls. The king does not need to know what his mother says in her sleep. But the king saw me last night, Sable protested, her voice small and tight. He knows I was there. He heard something. I could see it in his face. Let me worry about the king, Marin said, and the way she said it carried the weight of someone who had been worrying about the king for a very long time. You worry about keeping his mother alive as long as possible. Can you do that? Sable nodded. Because what else could she do? She left the anteroom on unsteady legs and nearly walked into a wall. She had been promoted from nobody to the personal attendant of the dying Queen Dowager, a woman who was using her last breaths to speak the one name that could get them both killed. And somewhere above her, Thandrick Voss was wondering what his mother had whispered to the girl with flour on her arms. Sable could feel the question hanging over her like an executioner's blade. It was only a matter of time before it fell. The first 3 evenings passed without incident, and that was almost worse, because at least terrible things had the decency to announce themselves. Sable arrived at the tower room each night after the kitchen fires were banked, carrying a tray and a knot of anxiety so tight it had taken up permanent residence behind her ribs. She helped Elspeth eat, changed the linens when the assistants did not come quickly enough, and sat in the chair beside the bed while the Queen Dowager drifted between sleep and a restless murmuring wakefulness that set Sable's nerves humming. Elspeth did not mention the forbidden name again. Not once. She spoke of other things, small things, memories that surfaced and dissolved like smoke. The garden she had kept when Thandrick was a boy. A hunting dog named Bracken, who had slept at the foot of her bed for 11 years. The way the light fell through the eastern windows in summer, painting the stone floors gold, and she spoke about Thandrick. Not the king, her son. The boy who had once brought her wildflowers from the ridge behind the castle, his hands scratched and dirty, grinning so wide you could see the gap where he had lost a tooth. The young man who had cried when his father died, silently, standing perfectly still in the rain, the tears indistinguishable from the water running down his face. The alpha who had come back from his first campaign with new scars and old eyes, and never quite laughed the same way again. Sable listened and tried not to let the stories reach too deep, because every one of them made the king more real, more human. And human was dangerous, because it meant she might start caring about a man who could destroy her with a word. On the fourth evening, the king came. She heard him before she saw him. The heavy, deliberate footsteps in the corridor, the guard snapping upright. The door swung inward without a knock, and Thandrick Voss filled the frame, and even though she had been in a room with him before, the sheer physical scale of the man knocked the breath out of her. He was enormous. Not just tall, but built like something designed for violence, shoulders so broad they nearly touched both sides of the doorframe, hands that looked like they could crush stone. His amber eyes swept the room with a predatory efficiency that catalogued every shadow, every potential threat in less than a heartbeat. And then they landed on Sable. She stood immediately, the chair scraping against stone. She dropped into a curtsy so deep her knee nearly touched the ground. "Your Majesty." He did not acknowledge her. He crossed to his mother's bedside in 3 long strides and lowered himself into the chair Sable had vacated. The wooden frame groaned beneath his weight. Sable pressed herself against the far wall and tried to become part of the stone. "Mother," Thandrick said. His voice was different here, quieter, stripped of the cold authority she had heard that first night. There was something underneath it, something raw and unfinished, and Sable wished desperately that she could not hear it, because it made the king feel like a person instead of a force of nature. Elspeth opened her eyes. "My boy," she murmured, and her thin hand found his. His massive fingers closed around hers with a gentleness that made Sable's chest ache so fiercely she had to look away. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Terrible," Elspeth said with perfect clarity. "I am dying, Thandrick. That is how I am feeling." A muscle jumped in his jaw. The healers say what you pay them to say. Do not patronize me. I can feel my own body failing." "You look terrible, too," Elspeth added, scrutinizing his face. "When did you last sleep properly?" "I sleep fine." "You are lying to a dying woman. That is bad luck in 7 kingdoms. When did you last shift?" The silence that followed sucked the warmth from the room. Thandrick's hand stilled on his mother's. "It has been a while," he said. "How long?" "It does not matter." "Thandrick, how long since you shifted?" He did not answer, but Sable saw it. The way his shoulders tightened, the way his jaw locked, the way something behind his eyes shuttered closed like a door slamming. And she understood, without anyone saying it aloud, that the king had not shifted in a very long time. Months, maybe. Maybe longer. For a wolf, that was not stubbornness. That was slow, deliberate self-destruction. "The girl stays," Elspeth said abruptly, her gaze flicking to Sable. Thandrick turned his head. He looked at Sable as though he had genuinely forgotten she existed, and the realization that she was so insignificant he could lose track of her in a space this small should have been a relief. Instead, it stung in a place she did not want to examine. "What girl?" he asked flatly. "Sable, the one against the wall trying to become furniture. She has been attending me these past evenings. She is kind, and she listens, and she does not try to fill the silence with nonsense. I want her to stay. She can be replaced with someone qualified. I do not want someone qualified, Elspeth shot back. I want someone who looks at me like a person instead of a patient. The girl stays, Thandrick. Grant a dying woman this one small kindness. The silence stretched. Sable held her breath, acutely aware that her future was being decided in a conversation she had no voice in. Thandrick's gaze cut back to Sable. She could feel it on her skin, heavy and assessing and cold, and she forced herself to hold still. To meet his eyes for just a moment. Amber and gold, hard as polished stone. Fine, the king said. And with that word, her life shifted on its axis for the second time in 4 days. As the minutes passed and Thandrick sat with Elspeth, holding her hand, murmuring things too low for Sable to hear, she noticed what no one was supposed to notice, the tremor in his fingers that he controlled with visible effort. The way he pressed his free hand against his ribs when he thought no one was looking, a gesture of pain so practiced it had become unconscious, and his scent. Sable was no healer, but she had worked in kitchens long enough to know the smell of something going wrong. A faint metallic bitterness threaded through the king's natural scent, barely detectable beneath the smoke and cedar and cold iron that clung to him. But it was there, and it was wrong. The Queen Dowager had told her the truth. The blood oath was eating him alive, and nobody was doing anything about it because nobody knew, or nobody dared, or nobody cared enough to risk the wrath of a king who would rather die than speak the name of the woman who had broken him. Sable closed her eyes and made a decision she already knew she would regret. She was going to help him, even if it killed her. A rhythm formed, and rhythms were dangerous because they made you forget to be afraid. Every evening, Sable climbed the tower stairs with a tray on one hip and a growing dread behind her sternum. She fed the Queen Dowager, changed her linens, sat in the hard chair and listened to Elspeth talk about a world that was slipping further from her grasp with every passing day. And twice a week, sometimes 3 times, the king came. He never acknowledged Sable. She might as well have been the curtains or the firewood or the draught that crept beneath the door. He sat with his mother and held her hand and spoke in that low, private voice that stripped away every layer of authority and left something underneath that Sable had no business hearing. But she could not close her ears, and she could not stop noticing. The tremor in his hands was getting worse. She saw it when he reached for the water cup on the 3rd visit, a visible shake he masked by gripping tighter. On the 5th visit, the metallic edge in his scent had intensified enough that she could taste it from across the room. On the 7th visit, she watched him rise from the chair and falter, one hand shooting to the bedpost for balance before he caught himself. Nobody saw it. The guard stood outside. Marin came and went, but was never present during his visits, and Elspeth's eyesight was fading with the rest of her. But Sable saw it. Every time, and every time, the knot in her chest pulled tighter. She started leaving things, small things. A cup of willow bark tea on the side table nearest the door, brewed strong and bitter for headaches. She never said it was for him. Just left it there and busied herself with Elspeth's blankets. The first night he ignored it. The second night he glanced at it. The third night the cup was empty when she arrived. Sable said nothing. She brewed another cup, set it in the same spot. The next morning, that cup was empty too. And beside it, placed with a precision that felt almost aggressive, sat a small bundle of dried sage tied with kitchen twine. Sable stared at it. It took her until midday to understand. The kitchen had been running low on dried sage for a week. She had complained about it to no one in particular while kneading bread, muttering under her breath that she could not make a proper stock without it. Someone had heard. Someone had remembered. "That is not from the king," she told herself firmly. She said it 3 times. She did not believe it once. That evening, Elspeth was awake and unusually sharp. "You are blushing," the Queen Dowager observed. "I am not. The stairs are steep. I am winded." "You have been climbing those stairs for 2 weeks, and you have never once been winded. Who has put that look on your face?" "No one, Your Grace." "Liar. I am dying. Entertainment is scarce. Indulge me." "Someone left me sage," Sable admitted, immediately regretting it. Elspeth smiled, and it was the first real smile Sable had seen from her. Not warm exactly, but knowing. The smile of a woman who recognized something even when it was trying very hard not to be recognized. "He notices everything, my son," Elspeth said softly, her gaze drifting toward the window. "He always has. Even as a boy. He would know which servants were sad, which guards were nursing injuries, which horses in the stable were favoring a leg. He carries every detail like a weight. That is his gift and his curse." Elspeth studied her for a long moment. "Do you know why he stopped shifting?" Sable shook her head. "The blood oath. When he swore it, he sealed his wolf away behind it. The oath and the wolf are bound together now. Every time his wolf tries to rise, the oath pushes it back and poisons him a little more. His wolf is caged inside his own body, and it is destroying them both." "Can it be broken?" Sable asked, her voice cracking. "He must release it willingly. He must speak her name and forgive what she did, to free his wolf from the cage he built around it." Elspeth closed her eyes. "But he would rather die than forgive her, and so his wolf will die first, and then he will follow. And I will already be gone by then, so I will not have to watch." Her voice broke on the last word. Sable reached for the Queen Dowager's hand without thinking. "I will not let that happen," Sable said. Elspeth opened her eyes. Tears glistened in them. "You are a kitchen worker," she said gently. "What can you do?" Sable did not have an answer. Not yet. But she was going to find one. The door opened. Thandrick stood in the frame, his amber eyes sweeping the room. They landed on Sable's hand wrapped around his mother's, on the tears on Elspeth's cheeks, on the expression on Sable's face, which she was not quick enough to hide. Something fractured in his gaze. A hairline crack in the mask he wore like armor. He crossed to his mother's other side and took her free hand. For a moment the three of them were connected. A chain of held hands and unspoken words, and a dying woman trying to save her son through the only person willing to listen. Then Thandrick's gaze lifted to Sable's, and the crack in his mask widened just enough for her to see what was behind it. Exhaustion, pain, and something that looked like gratitude, if kings were allowed to feel such things. "Thank you," he said, "for caring for her." 4 words. The first he had ever spoken directly to her. Sable's heart stopped, restarted, and then did something it had absolutely no right to do. It reached for him. Sable started dreaming about the king, and that was a problem. Not the kind that could be dismissed as stress or bad cheese. These were vivid, visceral things that left her gasping awake in the dark, with her pulse hammering and the phantom sensation of amber eyes burning into hers from inches away. In the dreams, he was always close. Too close. Close enough that she could see the flecks of darker gold in his irises, could feel the heat radiating off his skin, could smell the cedar and iron and that faint wrongness underneath. He looked at her like she was the only solid thing in a dissolving world. She woke from these dreams shaking and told herself it meant nothing. Her wolf disagreed. Sable's wolf had been quiet her entire life, docile, practically dormant. She had shifted a handful of times as a child, small and unremarkable and forgettable. Her wolf had never pushed, never demanded, never made itself known in any way that mattered. Until now. Now her wolf was restless, pacing, pressing against the inside of her skin with an urgency that had no name. It stirred whenever she climbed the tower stairs. It surged whenever she caught the lingering traces of the king's scent on the chair, on the blankets, in the air itself. And on the nights when Thandrick was present, when his physical body occupied the same space as hers, her wolf went almost feral with something that felt dangerously close to recognition. She shoved it down, buried it. Kings did not bond with nobodies. Whatever her wolf thought it was sensing, it was wrong. 3 weeks in, the king's condition worsened visibly. He came on a cold evening when the wind was rattling the tower windows like something trying to get inside. His footsteps were wrong, heavier on one side, compensating. He moved to the chair with a controlled rigidity she now recognized as pain management, each movement calculated to avoid jarring whatever was hurting him. And his scent. The metallic bitterness had thickened into something sharp and acrid, like blood left too long in the sun. Sable's wolf surged so violently she had to grip the bedpost to stay upright. Elspeth reached for his hand. "You are burning. Thandrick, you are running a fever." "I am fine, mother." "You are a terrible liar, and you always have been. Even as a boy, when you broke the West Garden fountain and blamed the dog, your ears turned red." She turned toward Sable. "Girl, touch his forehead." Sable froze. "Your Grace, I really do not think—" "That was not a request." Sable crossed the room on legs that felt borrowed from someone else. The king did not look up. She could hear his breathing, shallow and controlled, and beneath it the faint, ragged edge of a growl that was not directed at her, but at something inside him. She raised her hand. Her fingers trembled. She pressed her palm to his forehead. The heat was staggering. Not human fever heat, but something deeper, wilder, like touching the hood of an engine that had been running too long. And the moment her hand made contact, his wolf surged. She felt it. Not through any bond, not through any connection she should have had, but she felt it. A violent, desperate thrashing beneath his skin, like a caged animal throwing itself against bars. His wolf was trapped, and it was dying, and it was screaming, and the sound of it, felt rather than heard, nearly brought Sable to her knees. Thandrick's hand shot up and caught her wrist. His grip was iron. His eyes snapped to hers, and for one terrible electric moment, the mask was gone. There was nothing between them but the raw truth of what he was. A man in agony, a wolf in chains, a king drowning in a prison he had built with his own blood. "Do not touch me," he whispered. But he did not let go of her wrist. They stayed like that for what felt like 100 years compressed into 5 seconds. Then he released her, turned away, his breathing ragged. "He is burning up," she told Elspeth, forcing her voice level. "He needs a healer." "I do not need a healer," Thandrick said to the wall. "Then you need a priest," Sable shot back before she could stop herself. "Because at this rate you are going to need last rites before your mother does." The silence that followed was atomic. Sable's hand flew to her mouth. She had just told the Alpha King he was going to die, in front of his dying mother, using sarcasm. Thandrick turned slowly and looked at her, really looked at her, directly, fully, completely at her. For the first time since she had entered his world, the king was actually seeing the kitchen worker with flour on her arms. And then, impossibly, the corner of his mouth twitched. It was not a smile. It was the ghost of the memory of a smile, the faintest tremor of something that had been dead for so long it barely knew how to move. But it was there, and Sable saw it. "You are either very brave," Thandrick said slowly, "or profoundly stupid." "I have been told they are the same thing, Your Majesty," Sable replied, her voice shaking. "You may go," he said, but there was no ice in it. Just a quiet, exhausted dismissal from a man who did not have the energy to be angry. Sable curtsied and left on trembling legs. She made it halfway down the tower stairs before she had to stop and press her forehead against the cold wall and focus on breathing. Her wrist still burned where he had touched her. Her wolf was still howling, and somewhere in the center of her chest, in a place she had spent her whole life keeping locked and empty, something had cracked open. She was in so much trouble. 4 days later, the king collapsed. Sable was not there when it happened. She heard about it the way the entire palace did, through a wave of hushed voices and white faces and guards, moving with urgent purpose through corridors that had gone terrifyingly quiet. He had been in the council chamber. Mid-sentence, according to Counselor Hadwick, who had been standing close enough to catch him. One moment the king was speaking. The next, his eyes rolled back, and he dropped like a felled tree, and if Hadwick had not been there, his head would have cracked against the stone floor. They carried him to his chambers. The doors were locked, healers were summoned, and the palace held its breath. Sable held hers too, standing in the kitchen with flour on her hands and a terror in her chest that was far too large and far too personal for a girl who was supposed to be invisible. Her wolf was frantic, scratching and pacing and throwing itself against her ribs. Marin found her an hour later. The beta looked like she had aged 5 years in 60 minutes. Her face was gray, her eyes tight, her composure held together by sheer discipline. "Come with me. Now." They went to Ondine's infirmary, a long, low room that smelled of boiled roots and anxiety. Ondine was waiting, her silver-streaked hair disheveled, her hands stained dark. "He is dying," Ondine said bluntly. "His wolf is failing. The blood oath has been strangling it for over a year, and the damage is no longer reversible through conventional means. His wolf will die within weeks, and when it does, the king will follow. No shifter survives the death of their wolf. If he releases the oath, if he speaks the name," Marin began, "then his wolf can begin to heal. But he will not do it." Sable's fingernails dug into her palms so hard she felt the skin give. "Then we make him." Both women turned to look at her. "Sable," Marin said carefully. 3 advisors, 2 healers, and his own mother have tried to convince him. He dismissed the advisors, he fired the healers, and he told his mother, his dying mother, that he would rather follow her into the ground than speak that woman's name. He said that to Elspeth 2 months ago, before you came. It is what triggered the decline in her health. She stopped fighting her own illness after that. Sable felt sick. "Then I will talk to him. You. The woman who has been leaving him tea for 3 weeks, the one he left sage for, the one who told him he needed last rites to his face and he almost smiled." Marin and Ondine exchanged a glance, less skeptical, more considering. "He almost smiled?" Ondine asked. "His mouth has not moved in any direction other than downward in over a year," Marin said quietly. "When can I see him?" "His wolf is in agony," Ondine said. "The cage is collapsing inward. It is crushing the wolf, and the wolf is thrashing, and every time it thrashes, the oath tightens. Weeks, maybe less." "Then I need to see him now." Marin studied her for a long moment. "He is not the man you have been leaving tea for. Not right now. The pain has stripped him down to instinct. He may lash out. If he tells you to leave, then I will not leave." The room was dark, curtains drawn, fire banked to embers, and in the massive bed at the center of it all, barely visible in the dim amber glow, lay Thandrick Voss. He was diminished. That was the word that surfaced in Sable's mind and lodged there like a thorn. The man who had filled doorframes, who had radiated power like heat from a forge, looked smaller, hollowed. His skin had gone the color of old parchment, and sweat darkened his hair against the pillow. His breathing was shallow and labored, each inhale a visible effort. Sable crossed the room and sat in the chair beside his bed. The wood creaked. His eyes opened. Amber, dulled by pain but still sharp enough to cut. "Go away," he said. His voice was gravel scraped over raw stone. "No," Sable said. I am not your subject right now. I am the woman who has been bringing you tea, and you are the man who has been drinking it, and that makes us something whether you like it or not." He stared at her. His cracked lips parted, and for a moment he looked so bewildered that the king disappeared entirely, and all that remained was a very sick, very tired man who had no idea what to do with someone who was not afraid of him. "The sage," Sable said softly. "You left me sage." Something moved behind his eyes, a flinch. "I heard you complaining," he muttered. "You were very loud about it. I was muttering under my breath in a kitchen 2 floors below your chambers. I have good hearing. You are dying," she said. No preamble, no softening. She owed him the truth more than she owed him comfort. "So I have been told. And you could stop it. You could release the oath. You could say her name and live. Tell me why you will not." "You do not know what she did?" he said, and his voice was a wound torn open. "Then tell me." "She opened the gates," Thandrick said, and each word cost him something she could see him paying in real time. "During the siege of Ashenmere. We had held them for 11 days. 11 days, Sable. And on the 12th night, she opened the gates." His hands clenched in the sheets, tendons standing out like cables. "She was my mate. My bonded mate. She carried my scent and I carried hers, and I trusted her with everything I was. And she let them in. 37 people died that night. Women, children, elders who could not run. They died in their beds because the woman I loved opened the gates for the man who wanted to burn my kingdom to the ground." Tears slid down his face. He did not seem to notice them. "So do not tell me to forgive her. Do not stand there and tell me to speak her name like it is something simple. It is not simple. It is 37 lives that I carry every single day." "I am not asking you to forgive what she did," Sable whispered. "I am asking you to survive it." He turned his face away, toward the wall, toward the dark. "Get out," he said. Thandrick. His name, not his title. The word fell from her lips before she could catch it, intimate and forbidden and reckless. His head snapped back. The shock on his face was electric. No one called the king by his name. No one. "Get out," he whispered again, but the command had crumbled. What was left was a plea. Sable reached for his hand, wrapped her fingers around his, and held on while he tried to pull away. He was too weak to fight her. That fact alone, that the most powerful man in the kingdom could not break free of her grip, told her everything she needed to know about how close to death he truly was. "I will come back," she said. "Every day, whether you want me here or not." She released his hand, walked to the door, turned back one last time. He was watching her. His face was wet, his eyes were burning, and the look in them was not anger, it was fear. He was afraid to let her in, afraid of what it would mean, afraid that caring about someone again, anyone, would shatter whatever was left of him. Sable closed the door gently, leaned against the corridor wall, and let her own tears fall. Inside the room, she heard a sound she had never heard before. Low, broken, raw. The Alpha King was crying. Sable came back the next morning. And the morning after that. And the one after that. She did not ask permission. She did not wait for Marin's escort. She walked through the corridors with a tray of broth and willow bark tea, and the particular stubbornness of a woman who had decided that a king's pride was less important than his life. Thandrick fought her. Of course he did. The first morning, he told her to leave. She set the tray down and sat in the chair and started talking about the kitchen cat who had gotten into the cream stores and vomited on the head cook's shoes. He stared at her like she had lost her mind. She kept talking. He fell asleep somewhere between the cat and the shoes. The second morning, he refused the broth. She left it on the table and told him about the time she had accidentally set fire to a batch of honey cakes, and the entire East Wing had smelled like burnt sugar for 3 days. His mouth did the thing again. the tiny, involuntary twitch that was not quite a smile, but was trying very hard to become one. The third morning, the broth was gone when she arrived. "You drank it," she said. "It was in my way," he replied. "It was on the table across the room." "I have long arms." Sable bit back a smile and poured the tea. She did not mention that getting out of bed to reach a table across the room was more movement than he had managed in days. She did not mention that his color looked fractionally better, or that the metallic edge in his scent had softened by the smallest degree. She just poured the tea and sat down and started talking. She talked about everything and nothing: the kitchen, the palace gardens, the apprentice baker who was hopelessly in love with a stable hand and kept burning the rolls because she spent all her time staring out the window. She talked about Elspeth, about the stories the Queen Dowager told her, about the garden and the hunting dog Bracken and the boy who brought wildflowers with dirty hands. That one made him go quiet. "She told you about the flowers?" he asked, his voice rough. "She tells me everything," Sable said. "She talks about you the way people talk about the sun. Like the world would go dark without you." He turned his face toward the window. She pretended not to see the muscle jumping in his jaw. "My mother is dying because of me," he said. "Your mother is dying because she is sick," Sable corrected gently. "She is heartbroken because of you. Those are different things." On the fifth morning, he asked her to stay longer. He did not use those words. What he said was, "You have not finished the story about the baker and the stable hand." But the meaning was the same, and they both knew it. Sable stayed. She stayed through the morning and into the afternoon, and when she finally rose to leave, his hand caught hers. His fingers wrapped around hers, rough and warm and trembling with the effort it took to reach out, and she felt his wolf surge behind the oath. Not thrashing this time. Reaching. Straining toward her with a desperation that echoed in her own chest. "Why do you keep coming back?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Sable looked down at their joined hands. His were enormous, scarred across the knuckles, the hands of a warrior and a king. Hers were small, calloused from years in the kitchen, still faintly dusted with flour. "Because someone has to," she said, "and because I want to." That night, Sable visited Elspeth. The Queen Dowager was weaker, her breathing shallow, her lucid moments growing shorter. But when Sable took her hand, Elspeth squeezed back with surprising force. "Is he letting you in?" Elspeth asked. "Slowly," Sable said. "Faster than anyone else," Elspeth murmured. "In a year, no one has gotten this close. Not Marin, not the healers, not me." Her eyes found Sable's in the dim light. "You know what this means." Sable's throat tightened. She knew. She had known since the sage, since the way his hand had closed around hers like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to the world. "It is not a fated bond," Sable said quietly. "I would have felt it sooner. We both would have." "No," Elspeth agreed. "It is not fated. It is something rarer." The Queen Dowager's eyes glistened. "A chosen bond. It forms when two wolves recognize each other not because destiny commands it, but because they decide. Because they want each other more than they want their own safety." "He has not chosen me." "He has not chosen you yet," Elspeth corrected. "But he is choosing. Every time he drinks the tea, every time he lets you stay, every time he asks for one more story, he is choosing." Sable pressed her forehead to the Queen Dowager's hand and let the tears fall silently. "Save him," Elspeth whispered. "I cannot do it, but you can." "How?" "Make him say the name. Make him forgive. Not for Isolde. For himself. His wolf will not survive another week, Sable, and neither will he." "I will," Sable said. "I promise." She meant it with every fractured, terrified, stubborn piece of her heart. The next evening, Sable walked into the king's chambers and locked the door behind her. Thandrik was sitting on the edge of the bed, his elbows on his knees, his head bowed. He looked up when the lock clicked, and something crossed his face. Wariness, curiosity, and beneath it, a flicker of relief, as though he had been waiting for her without admitting it to himself. "We need to talk," Sable said. "That is never a promising beginning," he replied. She pulled the chair close to the bed and sat down facing him, their knees almost touching. Close enough that his scent surrounded her, cedar and iron and the bitter wrongness that was fainter now than it had been a week ago, but still there, still killing him. "I know everything," she said. "About Isolde, the siege, the blood oath. About what the oath is doing to your wolf." His face shuddered. The walls went up so fast she could practically hear them slamming into place. "My mother talks too much." "Your mother is trying to save your life. So am I. So listen." He looked at her with an expression that was equal parts fury and fascination, as though he could not decide whether to throw her out or pull her closer. "The oath is a cage," Sable continued, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "You built it to punish yourself for trusting someone who betrayed you. And now it is crushing your wolf. And your wolf is dying, and when it dies, you die. That is not justice, Thandrik. That is waste." 37 people died at Ashenmere," Sable said, and she watched him flinch at the number like it was a blade. "And you carry every single one of them. I know you do. But you did not open those gates. She did. And the oath you swore does not honor the dead. It does not bring them back. It does not protect anyone. It only destroys you. You do not understand. Then help me understand," Sable shot back. "Because from where I am sitting, you are a man who loved someone who did something unforgivable, and instead of letting the grief pass through you, you turned it into a weapon and pointed it at yourself. And now your wolf is dying in a cage you built, and your mother is dying in a tower because she cannot bear to watch. And I am sitting here begging you to do the one thing that could save you, and you would rather die than try." Her voice cracked on the last word. Tears spilled down her cheeks, hot and furious. She wiped them away with the back of her hand and held his gaze. Thandrik stared at her. His chest was heaving. His hands gripped the edge of the mattress so hard the wood groaned beneath his fingers. Behind the amber of his eyes, something was fracturing. The walls were cracking. She could see it happening in real time. "I cannot," he said, and his voice broke. "If I forgive her, it means what she did does not matter. It means those people died for nothing." "No," Sable whispered, moving closer. She took his hands, pried them from the mattress, and held them in her own. "Forgiving her does not mean it does not matter. It means you stop letting it kill you. The dead do not need your death, Thandrik. They need you to live, to be the king who makes sure it never happens again. You cannot do that from a grave." His hands were shaking in hers. She could feel his wolf beneath the surface, not thrashing now but pressing toward her, pressing toward the crack in the cage that her words were prying open. "I am afraid," he admitted, and the words came out like they had been pulled from somewhere so deep they had never seen daylight. "If I let the oath go, there is nothing left. No armor, no walls. Just me. And I was not enough to stop what happened." Sable squeezed his hands. "I know what it feels like to believe you are not enough," she said. "I was left on the castle steps in a flour sack. No note, no name, no explanation, and I spent my whole life believing it was because I was not worth keeping." His eyes, wet and raw, focused on her face with an intensity that burned. "But I was wrong," she continued, "and you are wrong. You were enough, Thandrik. You fought a siege for 11 days. You held those walls. One person's betrayal does not erase that. And carrying this oath does not make you noble. It makes you gone. And I do not want you to be gone." Her voice dropped to a whisper. I want you here. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full. Full of everything they had not said, every cup of tea and bundle of sage and story told in the dark. Every moment of choosing each other without naming it. Thandrick closed his eyes. His jaw worked. His hands gripped hers so tightly it hurt. But she did not pull away. Isolde, he said. The word came out hoarse, cracked, barely audible. But he said it. And the world split open. Sable felt it happen. A sound like 1,000 chains breaking at once, not heard but felt, vibrating through the floor and the walls and the marrow of her bones. Thandrick's body convulsed, his back arching, a ragged cry tearing from his throat as the oath shattered and his wolf surged free. Golden light erupted from somewhere beneath his skin, flooding the room with warmth so intense it felt like standing inside a sunrise. His wolf was free. She could feel it roaring through him, reclaiming the spaces it had been locked out of, flooding back into his blood and his bones and his heart with a ferocity that was terrifying and beautiful. Thandrick gasped. His eyes flew open, and they were different, brighter. The amber burned clean and fierce, the dullness gone, the pain gone, replaced by something vivid and wild and alive. He looked at Sable like he was seeing her for the first time, like he was seeing everything for the first time. And then his wolf reached for hers. Not a fated pull, not destiny snapping into place like a lock. A choice, a deliberate, conscious, devastating choice. His wolf extended itself toward hers and asked. Sable's wolf answered. The bond formed like a river finding the sea. Not a crash. Not a collision, a merging. Two currents flowing together with the quiet inevitability of something that had always been meant to happen, but only could because both of them had chosen it. The warmth of it flooded her chest, her limbs, the hollow places she had carried her entire life. For the first time, the emptiness was gone, filled, complete. Thandrick pulled her forward, his hands cradling her face and pressed his forehead to hers. Thank you, he breathed. Thank you. She pressed her forehead to his and then, before she could stop herself, she kissed him. It was brief and clumsy and tear-soaked, and it said everything that words had failed to say. His hand came up to cradle the back of her head, and he held her there, forehead to forehead, breathing her in. They held each other in the dark while the fire burned low and the bond hummed between them, golden and warm and new. Outside, the autumn wind rattled the tower windows. Inside, for the first time in over a year, the king slept. Deep, dreamless, peaceful sleep, with his face pressed into Sable's hair and his arms locked around her like he would never let go. Sable lay awake and listened to him breathe, and felt the steady pulse of their bond and cried quietly into his shoulder. Not from sadness, from the staggering, overwhelming relief of a foundling who had spent her entire life believing she was not worth keeping and had just been chosen by a king. The healing was not instant. It never is. Thandrick's wolf was free, but a year in a cage left marks that did not vanish overnight. He shifted for the first time 3 days after the oath broke, and Sable watched from the courtyard as a massive silver wolf stood in the dawn light and threw back its head and howled, the sound shaking the stones beneath her feet. When he shifted back, he was trembling, and his face was wet, and he crossed the courtyard and picked her up without a word and held her until the trembling stopped. Elspeth lived to see the bond announced. She sat in a chair by the window of her tower room, wrapped in furs, thin as paper, glowing with a fierce, fragile joy. She took Sable's hand and pressed it to her cheek and said, I told you. Foundlings owe nothing to anyone, but you gave him everything anyway. She died 11 days later, peacefully, in her sleep, with Thandrick holding one hand and Sable holding the other. The court's reaction was complicated. A foundling as the Alpha King's chosen mate was not what anyone had envisioned. The whispers followed Sable everywhere, but Thandrick, who had spent a year terrifying his entire kingdom into silence over a name, turned out to be equally effective at terrifying them into acceptance. "She is my mate," he told the council, his voice carrying the quiet, absolute authority of a man who had walked through death and come out the other side. "Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with my wolf." No one took it up with his wolf. Months later, on the first morning of true winter, Sable woke to the sound of the palace bells ringing the dawn hour. Thandrick was beside her, still asleep, one arm draped across her shoulder. The morning light caught the scar on his chest where the oath had once lived, pale and fading, and she pressed her fingertips to it gently. He stirred. "Good morning," he murmured, pulling her closer. "Good morning." She traced the scar with her fingertip. "Does it still hurt?" "Less every day." He kissed the top of her head. "Thanks to you." Sable smiled against his skin. Outside, the first snow of winter was falling on the palace grounds. Inside, the fire crackled, and the bond hummed, and the king who had forbidden anyone to speak a name held his chosen mate close, and breathed and slept and lived.